They say every family has its own Sunday ritual. For years, mine was simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and laughter that filled the small house I'd built with my late husband. But that Sunday, the laughter didn't belong to me anymore. I had spent the morning setting the table. My daughter Vanessa, her husband Chris, and my granddaughter Sophie were coming. The smell of rosemary floated through the kitchen. Soft jazz hummed in the background, and for a moment, I pretended everything was still the same, that I was still welcome. When they finally arrived, Sophie ran in first, throwing her arms around me. "Grandma, you smell like cookies." I smiled. "That's cinnamon, sweetheart. I wanted it to feel cozy." But behind her, Vanessa walked in, carrying the kind of silence that presses against your chest. She didn't even take off her sunglasses. Chris followed, glued to his phone, muttering about some urgent email. Dinner started like any other. Plates passed around, polite small talk. I asked Sophie about school. She told me about her science project, glowing with excitement. I turned to Vanessa. "Work still keeping you busy?" She nodded, barely glancing up. "Always." Halfway through the meal, the tension snapped. Vanessa sighed loudly, set down her fork, and said, "Mom, we need to talk." I looked at her hands, perfectly manicured, trembling just slightly. "What's wrong, honey?" She took a deep breath. "You can't keep showing up unannounced. Chris and I talked, and we think it's time you understood that this isn't your place anymore." The room spun. I blinked at her, thinking I'd misheard. "What do you mean? Not my place?" "You've lived with us for months now," she said. "It's not good for Sophie. She needs space, and honestly, so do we." Chris added without looking up, "We've decided to sell the house. It's too big anyway." My fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate with a sound that cracked something inside me. I looked at Sophie. She was staring at her plate, confused, scared. "Vanessa," I whispered, "this was your father's home. Ours." "Not anymore, Mom," she said coldly. "You're not part of this household." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the music had stopped, or maybe I just stopped hearing it. I stood up slowly, because anger wasn't what I felt. It was something colder. "All right," I said quietly. "Then I won't be a burden any longer." I went to my room, packed a few clothes, my late husband's photograph, and the recipe box Sophie once said smelled like love. When I left, no one followed, not even Sophie. Outside, the air was sharp and still. My reflection in the car window looked like someone else, older, smaller, but somehow lighter. For the first time in a long while, I didn't have anywhere to go. But maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something new. The next morning, I woke up in my car. The sunrise over the small Texas town painted everything gold, even the cracked dashboard and the empty cup of coffee I'd forgotten to throw away. I'd spent the night outside an old diner, the kind that never truly closes, where the waitress knows everyone's story before they even speak. When I walked in, she looked at me the way people do when they sense a quiet heartbreak. "Morning, hun," she said. "You look like you've had a long night." "You could say that," I smiled weakly. "Can I get the strongest coffee you've got?" She nodded and slid a steaming mug my way. That first sip was bitter, but it was real, like everything else I had left. After breakfast, I drove straight to the bank. I'd been putting this off for years, always telling myself that family should come before business. That love was worth more than paperwork. But love, I realized, should never cost your dignity. The young banker, neat hair, perfect smile, the kind who probably still called his mother for recipes, greeted me with a practiced politeness. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Williams?" "I need to update my accounts," I said. "Remove my daughter and her husband as beneficiaries." He paused, his fingers freezing mid-type. I could see the surprise in his reflection on the glass. To him, I was just another old woman with shaky hands and a cardigan that smelled faintly of cinnamon. But when the screen flashed the balance, his eyebrows shot up. I didn't smile. I just said, Go ahead. He cleared his throat. Of course, ma'am. Everything will be processed by noon. Good, I said, standing up. Thank you. And one more thing. Could you recommend a good lawyer? The rest of the day was quiet. I stopped by a park, sat under an oak tree, and opened my notebook. It had been years since I'd written anything that wasn't a grocery list. I wrote a single line, "You are allowed to begin again." Later that week, my old friend Martha called. She'd heard through the town grapevine that I'd left Vanessa's place. In small towns, news travels faster than regret. You know, she said, the community center is looking for volunteers, girls without mothers, boys without grandmothers. They need someone like you. I almost laughed. Someone like me? Someone patient, someone kind, someone who knows how to start over. I showed up 2 days later. The place smelled like crayons, disinfectant, and hope. A woman named Melanie greeted me, all energy and warmth with a clipboard that seemed to weigh more than she did. We could use a teacher for our weekend cooking class, she said. You look like someone who knows her way around an apron. I suppose I do, I answered. That Saturday, 5 kids showed up. They didn't care about measurements or perfect recipes. They cared about being seen. When I told them that a cracked pie crust could still taste sweet, a boy named Tyler whispered, "Like people?" Exactly, I said, like people. When I got home that evening to my small rented apartment that smelled like lavender and fresh paint, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. A few days later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was small and careful. Sophie's, "Grandma, Mom doesn't know I'm writing this. I miss you. I kept one of your recipes and made cookies for my class. Everyone loved them. I wish you were here to see it." Tears fell before I even finished reading. Then I noticed something else. A small note folded inside. Vanessa's handwriting. "Mom, do whatever you want with your money, but please don't stop writing to Sophie." It wasn't an apology, but maybe, just maybe, it was a start. That night I baked cookies. Not for anyone, just because I could. And as the smell filled my tiny kitchen, I realized something. I didn't need my old house to feel at home anymore. By the time spring arrived, I had found a rhythm again. Mornings began with coffee on the porch of my little apartment. Quiet, steady, no one shouting, no one judging. The world felt wider now, not because it changed, but because I finally allowed myself to look around. At the community center, I met Glenn. He was fixing a broken shelf when I walked in with a tray of muffins. His gray hair peeked out from under a baseball cap that read, "Retired, not expired." He smiled the kind of smile that comes from surviving enough storms to appreciate a calm sky. "Smells like cinnamon," he said. "Everything I bake smells like cinnamon," I laughed. "It's my signature scent. Makes people forget if the pie burns." He chuckled. "Then I'll take 2 slices, just in case." We started working together. Glenn was the handyman for the center. Quiet, capable, with a gentle way of fixing things that went beyond nails and screws. He didn't talk much about his past, but I noticed the small tattoo on his wrist, an old military insignia. I didn't ask. He didn't explain. Some stories, I knew, only bloom when they're ready. Weeks turned into months. Together, we repaired benches, painted walls, taught kids how to make sandwiches that didn't collapse. Sometimes, in between laughter and spilled flour, I'd catch him watching me with that patient warmth, the kind that doesn't demand anything, just stays. Then one afternoon, as I was tidying up after class, Melanie, the coordinator, pulled me aside. "There's someone waiting for you outside," she said softly. "Looks like she's been crying." My heart stuttered. I stepped out, and there she was. Vanessa. No designer coat, no practiced smile. Just a woman, tired and raw. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "Can I sit?" We sat on the steps of the center, the paint still drying behind us. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "Things at home, they're falling apart. Chris and we're separated. I didn't know where else to go." I wanted to reach for her hand, but I waited. "You came here," I said. "That means something." She nodded, eyes red. I don't even know how to start fixing what I broke. Start small, I said, like baking, one ingredient at a time. She laughed through tears, that soft, trembling laugh I hadn't heard in years. For a long time, we just sat there, two women who'd finally stopped pretending. That weekend, she brought Sophie. When the girl saw me, she dropped her backpack and ran straight into my arms. "Grandma, can we make your cookies again?" I smiled. "Only if you promise to teach me that secret you added last time." Sophie grinned. "Vanilla extract, lots of it." That day, 3 generations stood in my little kitchen. Flour on our faces, laughter echoing against the walls. For the first time, there were no unspoken rules, no heavy silence, just warmth, cinnamon, and new beginnings. Later that night, Glenn stopped by to drop off a toolbox. He saw the mess and smiled. "Looks like life moved back in," he said. "Yeah," I answered, "and it brought company." He lingered a moment. "Eleanor, there's a volunteer picnic next weekend. You should come. We could go together." I looked at him, really looked. The kind eyes, the steady hands, the quiet strength that had helped me rebuild not just furniture, but trust. "I'd like that," I said, "but only if you bring pie." He laughed. "Deal." Summer came the way healing does, quietly then all at once. Lawns turned from pale brown to soft green, and even the old coffee maker in my kitchen started brewing without complaint, as if it knew life had changed for the better. I woke up earlier, slept deeper, and finally understood the difference between being needed and being loved. Saturdays became repair days with Glenn. He'd arrive with that battered toolbox and the same calm smile of a man who'd already weathered his share of storms. Together, we drove around town, fixing sagging porches, tightening loose hinges, replacing the burnt-out bulbs that made hallways gloomy. Sometimes I caught a look on a widow's face when the light came back on, half disbelief, half quiet relief. And I thought, that's what grace looks like when you hand it over gently. Sundays belong to me again. Not out of duty, out of choice. I baked for the kids at the community center, muffins that forgave uneven measurements, cookies that survived too much stirring, pies that didn't mind cracked crusts. One boy once said, "They look like people. Not perfect, but still good." I smiled. Exactly, still good. Vanessa started visiting on Thursdays. No fancy clothes, no practiced smiles, just her, a daughter learning to show up again. She'd hover in the doorway of my kitchen, waiting until I pulled out the cutting board. We talked about work, about exhaustion, about regret. And slowly the sharpness in her voice softened. "I don't know how to fix everything I broke," she whispered once. "You don't start by fixing," I said. "You start by stirring, slowly, and letting time thicken the sauce." Sophie filmed us for her school project. So she called it Grandma's House, instructions for when things fall apart. She captured the smallest things, steam rising from a pot, hands dusted in flour, the golden light catching on old curtains. During one scene, off camera, she asked, "Grandma, what do you do when people stop being kind?" I paused, thinking. "You build a place where kindness is the rule," I said, "and then you leave the door unlocked." One afternoon, Glenn brought a small wooden plaque he'd found at a yard sale. It read, "Lower the shelves, lift the heart." We hung it between the kitchen and the living room. When he tapped the last nail, the sound echoed steady, like a heartbeat. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Some promises sound truest in wood and work. Then came the volunteer picnic. Long tables under cottonwood trees, lemonade that tasted too sweet but no one minded, and laughter that tangled with birdsong. I sat beside Glenn, watching him talk with another veteran about a crooked shelf, and I thought, real men don't boast, they repair. Vanessa arrived late that day. No makeup, no defenses, just a woman ready to start again. "I'm not who I was," she said quietly. "Good," I answered. "Neither am I." We shared watermelon in silence, two people relearning the same language, forgiveness. Even Chris, her ex-husband, showed up once, Not to make amends, but to return an old bowl. He said, "Thank you for loving Sophie out loud where she could hear it." I smiled. Love grows wherever it's watered. Some people, I've learned, have to leave just to remember how to knock again. Not every day sparkled. Some nights. The past came tapping like an uninvited guest, but I'd learned to set another plate for sorrow, feed it, listen to it, and send it off kindly before dessert. You can't bully a heart into healing. You can only keep it warm until it chooses to rest. Then came Neighbors' Night at the center, the premiere of Sophie's short film. People brought folding chairs and store-bought cookies, and the old projector whirred like it wanted to matter again. The screen flickered to life. Close-ups of hands wiping counters, sunlight through windows, laughter over tea. And my voice, soft, steady, said, "Start small, go slow, finish warm." The final shot lingered on the lamp in my window, glowing gold against the blue dusk, and Sophie's voice whispered, "Some lights aren't brighter. They're just faithful." When the applause faded and the chairs folded, Vanessa came to me with an envelope. Inside was a photograph, 3 generations of us, covered in flour, smiling like we'd survived something big. On the back, she'd written, "I'm learning where to put the shelves. Thank you for leaving the light on." Glenn never proposed, never made speeches. He just started leaving his toolbox by my back door and a spare mug on the counter. Love, at our age, doesn't need fireworks. It just needs 2 chairs and weather that keeps showing up. By autumn, we launched a kids program called Fix First, Then Dream. We taught them to tighten a hinge before applying for scholarships, to write thank you notes before big asks, to practice a recipe before inviting guests. And I thought of my younger self, the one who believed love was proven through Sunday dinners and perfect families. Turns out, love is proven on Tuesdays, when you simply decide to try again. Sophie's film won a small state award. The certificate hung crooked until Glenn just happened to have a level in his pocket. Vanessa brought her own recipes now, humble things like bean stew and cornbread. She didn't ask for a key, she just learned the rhythm of my knock, and that was enough. One rainy evening, we had dinner. Me, Glenn, Vanessa, and Sophie. The rain stitched its pattern on the windows, and the lamp glowed steady, faithful. After they left, I stood by that window and turned the light on again. Not for anyone else, for myself. Because some lights don't need to shine to save you. They just need to stay.